Well, IU fans, it all felt interesting there. There was a little glimmer of hope as we wound down the regular season, moved into the Big Ten tournament. The Hoosiers were playing their best ball in the month of March
Yeah.
as the season wound down. But perhaps in a blessing in disguise, Nebraska absolutely obliterated the Hoosiers on Friday night to end IU season. The Hoosiers went down to the Cornhuskers 93-66, and it felt like a lot of the goodwill that the Hoosiers built up over that 5 game winning streak kind of went out the door. Obviously, Galloway was injured. You had a couple of guys who got banged up during the game, a couple of guys in foul trouble, but Indiana has one of the biggest 3-4 week stretches in recent memory as far as their program is concerned. And portal season is right around the corner. That kicks off Monday. So Matt and I had to hop on here. We had to record a podcast episode, discuss the Hoosiers end of the season, what we're looking for as far as the transfer portal, and so much more here on episode 324 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Saturday, March 16th, 2024. I'm your host, Nithin Krishnan. Here with me is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, we're going to throw out some of our favorite portal picks here a little bit later today, but let's wind down. Let's close the book on the Hoosiers in 23-24. 19-14, 11-11 against Big Ten opponents. Just felt like a big bunch of mediocrity. What are your major takeaways as far as Indiana's 23-24 season is concerned?
All right. So it's not that funny, but I was going to say funny enough. Um, when we projected the season earlier this season, I said the team would go about 10-10 in conference and win about 20 games. They went 10-10 in conference and won 19, and they're outside the tournament. Now, I did say that they were going to be a bubble team, and if Indiana had maybe won one or two games, Kansas or the away at Illinois, and found a way to win those games,
Yeah.
they probably would have been firmly on the bubble, or even maybe not on the bubble exactly, but they would have been somewhere around there, right? And it just one or two bounces of the ball, really, in couple of spots here or there. That's the difference between this team making tournament or not. Really sucks. They didn't play a great style of basketball, so the analytics hated them. And honestly, rightfully so, because they were kind of frauds at some points. But overall, I think this was a decent basketball team that slightly underperformed. And given some people's preseason expectations and, the kind of building up the program, going from a playing game to winning a game in the NCAA tournament last year, you thought that, okay, this would be the next step up, and, we kind of
Sure.
are hopefully a second weekend team. Not the case. I think most people, at least that are rational, saw this team as kind of a rebuilding year. Problem is, there's not a lot of pieces on this team coming back next year that I'm looking forward to seeing again. Like, you're not a rebuilding year usually means, okay, a couple guys are improving. It's like, all right, I feel like Malik Renu got better and worse as the season went on. The guy that improved the most is Khalil Ware, who, I mean, for all intents and purposes, is gone. He's an NBA player.
Sure.
Um, and Xavier Johnson's injured for half the year, doesn't play. Gabe Cupps actually showed some signs of life towards the end of the season, but even then, he's still not looking like a Big Ten caliber player going into next year. I thought Trey Galloway maybe improved slightly, which is crazy to think because I thought he was really good last year. And he took a bigger role. Anthony Leal slightly improved, but outside of four players on this roster, everybody else is like, all right, CJ Gunn, we already expect to leave to BH. You already expect Banks to leave. Barely even got to see uh um Peyton Sparks this year. Like,
He's,
where was he at all?
yeah, sure.
Um, so there's a lot of guys on this roster that I'm just kind of like, meh, right? A year in which you were supposed to see improvement, we kind of saw a lot of stagnation, which really sucks. And then you lose your five-star promising freshman going into next year, right? The guy that was supposed to come in and
Right.
and and be kind of like,
Elevate.
oh, look at this. And I didn't even mention Mbako yet because I don't know if he's going to be on the roster next year. If I'm going to
Sure.
be completely honest with you, there was rumors of him transferring
Yeah.
around January. Full disclosure, and some of you might have been privy to that. Some of you might not have been. They used him out of
Then
position all year,
he ramped it up, right? As the
and then
season
he
went on.
ramped it up as the season went on. He's not really an NBA draft pick. At least he's not a first rounder like Khalil will probably be. You're looking at more of a second round pick for him. And it's really the staff has to recruit Mbako to come back just as much as they had to recruit him to get here in the first place. Right? Because he can very well just be like, all
Yep.
right, you know what? Let's go get this NBA development and leave.
Or go to Duke or Kansas, right? I
Or
mean,
yeah, or hit the transfer portal, of course, right? But I mean, the next step for him would be the NBA, obviously. So they're gonna have to recruit him to stay, regardless of what his decision is, that whether it's to leave for the transfer portal or leave for greener pastures to NBA. They're gonna have to recruit him. So I don't even know if he's coming back, right? And he
sure.
was the real big bright spot, TBH, of
The
the guys
season.
that could return.
I
Like, I
mean,
mean,
yeah.
Clelware technically could return, but he's not
Right.
going to, guys.
Right.
Let's just
Well,
throw that
and
idea out of your brain. It's not happening.
we shouldn't want him to. Like,
No,
I
we
think that's
shouldn't.
the bigger
Yeah,
thing. You want Khalil Ware to go to the NBA and start thriving in the NBA so
correct.
that you can use that as recruiting weaponry, recruiting argument because Oregon's coming to the Big Ten. And you want to say, hey,
Well,
look, why, look what we did with the guy that Oregon screwed up.
no, yeah, you want him to declare for the NBA draft like
Right.
today.
Yeah.
Um,
Go into the lottery and average 18-7 next year on the Hornets or whatever, right? You
yeah,
want him
but
to do that. Yeah.
him going from not playing at Oregon to becoming a first round draft pick at Indiana within 1 year, right? And leaving and getting him that step up is a leg up in recruiting transfer portal players as long as you remember their names correctly, right? Like because you can go, hey, I went and got Khalil. He played like 6 minutes per game at Oregon last year, was an absolute afterthought. He averaged what, 18 points per game at Indiana this year?
Yeah,
Or something like
but he was
that.
close. Yeah.
Um, and I got him to a first round grade, and he was our best player, right? So I can do
The
that
next
with
guy,
you. And
you come
there's
in
a
and
couple
yeah,
guys, in the going to be in the transfer portal that I think, if they're at a school like Indiana and they play really well next year, from going their freshman year into their sophomore year or their sophomore year into their junior year, can really get some NBA draft buzz, especially when it's a super. I mean, Ant and I have talked about this so much over like on Twitter Spaces and then
yeah.
on our other podcasts. This 2024 class is the worst freshman class possibly
Mm,
ever. Ever, ever. As far as like NBA
wow.
caliber guys go, there is maybe 5 or 6 guys in this class that I think are NBA players or going to be NBA players after their freshman year.
Interesting.
And there's a lot of guys who I look at and I go, they're gonna suck. Like they're gonna come into college basketball and they're not gonna be ready. And I'm talking about a majority of the 5-star recruits in this class.
Yeah.
They're not gonna be good. So next year, smart, whether the
Well,
staff really thought about this
yeah.
at all, Nithin. Last point I make. Whether the staff really thought about this at all, it's actually not a really bad thing to kind of shy away from freshmen at this point because
Hmm.
again, that class is just really sucks. I mean, Queen is going to stink it up at Maryland. McNeely probably would have had a lot of growing pains at Indiana just because he probably would have been playing out of position in the first place. But like the staff prioritizing the portal this year is actually not a bad thing in the short term because again, this class is just so overrated. It sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at this. First of all, Khalil Ware last year, excuse me, this past season, 16-10 for the Hoosiers in 33 minutes a game. And I mean, that's a huge step up from the 16 minutes a game he played at Oregon, 6 points a game. Like, it's a huge win for Mike Woodson and for his staff as far as Khalil Ware is concerned. You want him to go to the league, you want him to do well in the league so that the next highly skilled wing, guard, center, whatever the case is, that maybe struggled in his first spot, can say, "Hey, Indiana is a place for me. It's a place where I can go," and that could be a conversation that takes place as soon as tonight if you want to start tampering, or Monday if you want to actually play by the rules. As far as Mackenzie Mbako is concerned, totally good point as far as what his options are. Like, I actually do think the transfer to another school is a potential thing for Mbako to look at. Especially if you consider your comment on the 25 NBA draft looking ugly, at least from a collegiate player perspective. If Mackenzie Mbaka is going to be in the same draft class as Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper and Flory Badunga and Derek Queen and McNeely and Asa Newell and all those guys, like Mbako might say, shoot, I think my NBA prospects are better than all those guys. Let me spend another year in college and see what I do next.
Absolutely.
From my standpoint, the number one task for Indiana from Mike Woodson is to bring back Trey Galloway, Malik Renu, and Mackenzie Mbako. Right? So Galloway looks like he's back, so you can check that box. Renu and Mbako are the phone calls, are the in-person conversations you need to have yesterday, today, tomorrow. Lock them in. You're not going anywhere next year without those three guys. And I don't care. I don't care if you get the top 7 players in the portal. None of those guys are going to help you get to the NCAA tournament, win in the NCAA tournament if you don't have some of those returning players.
I've seen some people not want Renu back, and it blows my mind.
Stupid. Yeah, I don't care if Renu plays the 4. I mean, look, you got to put him in the best position to succeed. But bottom line is, he's got to come back. Now, he's got to fix his fouling issues and things like that. But we're talking about somebody that next year you're really looking forward to seeing play 30 minutes a game and playing a significant role on this team. At least 5. I think it's 5. I think the top 5 players in this conference, and if you want to include Braden Smith, you can. But they're all seniors. It's Boo Buie, and it's Terrence Shannon, and it's Zach Edey. These are guys that are on their team for multiple seasons. Jameer Young.
Edey could come back, but I don't even want to.
So it's either seniors or guys or who are potentially COVID seniors next year. But Bowie, Terrence Shannon, Zach Edey, Jameer Young. I might be missing 1 or 2 others that are in that conversation who are senior. Tyson Walker, right? And again, Tyson Walker also a transfer, but he's been there for multiple seasons after coming over from Northeastern. So you need to have a core of players who have been here for a couple years who know what's up. Now, the extra part of that is they have to be productive. And of course, you want to see, I'm going to call it a bounce back season from Trey Galloway next year. I think maybe in Trace's last season, he overperformed a little. This year, he struggled a little bit from the free throw line. Galloway struggled a little bit with shooting the basketball. But you know what? I think you maybe see water hit its level next year. You get something in the middle next season.
I thought he improved late on the season.
The interesting thing is,
as most important players,
as we consider the portal, right? Does Indiana need a distributing point guard? I don't think so. I think Trey Galloway could potentially be that guy. There's a lot of conversation about Galloway playing out of position. Maybe he was always out of position until he took over as Indiana's point guard for 25 minutes a game.
My top 2 guys, I will just hint this. My top 2 guys that I want Indiana to transfer or go after a transfer are both scoring point guards.
And you can bring those guys in. That makes a lot of sense. But as far as someone who's actually running the offense and playing point guard and facilitating, Gabe Cupps does it a certain way. Xavier Johnson does it a certain way. I think Trey Galloway does it very similar to how Gabe Cupps does it, except Trey Galloway is an old guy, right? He's old. He's been around. He's done it for a few years. And I think if Trey Galloway starts as Indiana's distributing point guard next year, you might see some single season records go down as it relates to assists per game in the Big Ten, at least as far as recent years are concerned. So I'm curious what Woodson and the staff are thinking right now. Do they want, like when you say, for those of you who are at home, for those of you who are listening to this podcast, Indiana's got to get guards. Well, it gets a lot more specific than that. It's very vague. Indiana, you could argue, has a guy that can run an offense, that can put players in the right position, that can distribute the basketball and play within himself and get 7 assists per game. But as you pointed out, Matt, getting that scorer, getting that guy who can create offense, getting a couple guys who can do that, ignite quick points, especially when you're down on the road in Big Ten play or in neutral site play. Now we're talking about something that, can easily fit the type of gaps that Indiana has on their roster. Interesting to see Indiana, of course, respond. Some of the comments that they made after getting seal clubbed 93-66 last night. Mike Woodson believes in his offense, Matt. I was surprised to hear that. He said we didn't do too much. Our offense. He was asked, and it was a great question after the game. From an offensive philosophical standpoint, and Mike Woodson loves talking basketball. Did he do enough with this team? What could he have done better to make it work? And he said mostly he thought it did work. He just had to make some more. He just got to make some more shots. I was surprised to hear that. I was surprised to hear Yasir Roseman echo some of those same comments when he spoke to Don Fisher after the game, because Woodson got ejected. So Roseman got the post-game interview with the radio crew. I was surprised to hear that, considering the Hoosiers scored 61 points in a win over Penn State on Friday night. It wasn't exactly an offense that scared opposing defenses here. I thought your point was interesting, Matt, when you said Indiana's a couple bounces away from making the tournament. They're also a couple bounces away from getting embarrassed by Army, by Florida Gulf Coast, by Kennesaw State, by Morehead State. So as you sit here, Matt, going forward, obviously Indiana needs to bring back Galloway, Renu. You got to bring back, Anthony Leal as part of this conversation, Mackenzie Mbako. But the coaching staff has to devise a plan here. From an offensive standpoint, what did the Hoosiers do wrong this past season, and how can they fix that over the next few weeks?
They got to get guards that can ISO. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, they got to get shot makers, guys at the end of the clock that you are okay with getting the ball. The offense worked last year because you had Jalen Hood-Schifino, right? You had a guy that could, all right, we need a bucket. Let's let Jalen cook in the mid-range, right? And he can go get a shot of his own when everything breaks down, right? So Woodson's offense does work to a point. It just needs to be more complex. I think that's the problem, is they weren't running complex sets at the end of the year because, as you saw, especially during the stretch where Indiana really sucked on offense, which is like, what, January, February-ish?
Yeah, sure.
The players didn't know the plays, right?
You're right. Yeah.
Which like, that's as much on the coaches as it is on the players. Like, you got to have the guys prepared, but also the guys have to get prepared themselves. They got to know what they're doing. And so maybe with some guys that are just smarter and, maybe a little bit more together, and on the same page, you might actually see a team like Indiana run some sets, maybe some Spain pick and roll, maybe some advanced NBA stuff, but you can't run advanced stuff without having guys that know how to run it. And that's not what IU had this year, TBH.
It's fair. It's fair to say. I think, Indiana had moments where things look good offensively. They obviously had some really good first halves against teams like Maryland, against Minnesota. They had some interesting second halves when you're talking about the road win against Ohio State, the road win against Maryland. A really good start to the game against Michigan State at home until the Galloway injury took place. That's a really good point, though, because it's not just a matter of I got to get shooters.
You got to get shooters that can run stuff and know what they're doing. It's
not just a matter of I got to get scorers. I got to get bigs. You've got to find players that fit what works at Indiana. You've got to find players that fit with what you're trying to achieve. And we've talked about this for the last few weeks, Matt. I'm not sure what Mike Woodson wants this basketball team to look like.
Right.
When he took over as the coach, first press conference, I retweeted it yesterday on Indiana HQ. He's talking about how valuable the three-point shot is, how valuable it is to spread the floor and play modern basketball. He talks about how the Knicks, when he was there, led the league in three-point attempts and three-point makes. We're not seeing that now.
No.
That's not the basketball we're watching. A couple weeks ago, he tells Don Fisher that he thinks you can win in college basketball playing inside out. Now, here's the interesting part with Woodson. He's really good at coaching up his bigs. He's really good at coaching up defense.
Yep.
Trace, success story. Khalil Ware, success story. Malik Renu's on the right track.
Yep.
You know, if all things go well, he's going to be a first team all Big Ten guy next year. But from a guard standpoint, it's been Xavier Johnson and it's been Trey Galloway for the entirety of Mike Woodson's tenure so far, except for a 6-week, an 8-week window where Jalen Hood-Schifino took over as the alpha guard.
Yep.
And you saw the Hoosiers experience a lot of success with those home and home wins against Illinois, those home and home wins against Purdue, the home win over Michigan State. You had your bumps along the way to Iowa and Northwestern, but of course, Indiana ended up at the top 4 seed, a number 3 seed in the Big Ten tournament, a number 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. It's not all been bad news through 3 years. But you've got to be humble. You've got to be willing to understand that this past season was filled with a lot of game planning, roster building, in-game mistakes. Even as late as yesterday. When you were in the game against Nebraska for the first 5 minutes, for the first 10 minutes, for the first 15 minutes. Yet your lottery pick center barely serves as a focal point in the offense. Now, it's one thing if Khalil Ware touches the ball and then he distributes it. He hands it off on a dribble handoff to Johnson. He dumps it in a buddy ball fashion to Renu. He kicks it out to the wing to Mackenzie Mbako. But just because Nebraska defends your star big a certain way, that shouldn't preclude Ware from touching the basketball. And you go
have
back,
different ways to get him the basketball.
You go back and you watch the first half. There are windows for him to get the ball out on the perimeter, out on the elbow, down in the low post. There were chances to get the ball to your superstar big, yet Indiana failed to do so. So that's where I look at this. And Woodson, after the game, talks about we need to add more talent. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if talent's the most important thing that Indiana needs to add to this roster. Because when I watched the Hoosiers play this year, you didn't get it yesterday because he got banged up. The most valuable minutes you saw were when Anthony Leal came in and played smart, anticipatory, efficient, effective basketball, putting his teammates in the right place, thinking ahead, a half step ahead of the defense or a half step ahead of the opposing offense, playing sound, fundamental basketball. And Leal's going to be back next year, according to his senior day comments. So that's good to see. But I'm not so sure if Indiana needs to just look at the NBA draft prospects and the 5-star players and build a roster full of them. If you have them, that's great. But I think you'll agree with this. You have to find guys that fit what you're trying to accomplish. What does a successful Indiana basketball team look like to you next year, Matt? Because Mike Woodson and the staff are going to hit the portal here in a couple of days. What style, what philosophy do you want to see this team go forward with on offense and defense? Are there any other teams in the Big Ten or in college basketball that you think Indiana can emulate going into next season?
I'm not even sure style, but you just saw this Wisconsin team beat Purdue. Last year they missed the tournament and they underperformed, and people wanted guard gone. Yeah. And now they're playing for a Big Ten championship on Sunday tomorrow.
Yep.
What did they add going into this year? Nithin, just
AJ Storr.
AJ Storr. That's it. They added one guy and completely revitalized this roster. And I think Indiana's in a very similar spot. You lose Xavier Johnson. Honestly, okay. He had a up and down career at IU, but he was a really big part of 2 NCAA tournament teams here. We wish. If you can add somebody that brings a dynamic like AJ Storr brings to Wisconsin, because you have Trey Galloway, Leal, and hopefully Mbako and Renu.
Yep.
Those are 4 guys returning. That's a 5-star returning sophomore. That's a high 4-star, maybe potential all-conference guy, hopefully playing his correct position, which is center or the 5. And then you have maybe another starter in Leal, who's going into his senior year and does all the dirty things for you, and then you have a second point guard, Trey Galloway. So go get a guy who's a point guard that can score first, right? And they went and got, obviously they had a point guard already for Wisconsin and Chucky Hepburn, so they went and got a scoring wing, but you can go get a scoring guard and get a very similar result. Of course, you're gonna need more than just one guy on this team because you're probably gonna be losing a bunch more. So you're gonna need to go get some bench guys, maybe a Jalen Blackman, right, from Stetson. Maybe some guys off the bench that can give you some points, and maybe a wing or two, an athletic wing or two that can kind of bring a different look. But I really like the idea of this team is genuinely 1 or 2 guys away, 1 or 2 starters away from having a fabulous starting 5, an absolutely fabulous dynamic starting 5 that can score in the post, can run 5 out, can shoot the 3, can get out in transition, share the ball really well. Leal shares the ball really well. We've already talked about how Galloway could possibly lead the conference in assist if he was ran as a pure point.
Yeah.
Renu, honestly, for all the boneheaded plays he does, because he does 1 or 2 a game, he has these fabulous passes out of the post sometimes, and from post to post, he can do that.
He is a sophomore. Like I'm not going to be overly harsh on Malik Renu. Like
no,
now I'm just expecting this offseason to be one where he eliminates some of those. That's it.
I think people quickly forget how Trace Jackson Davis grew. In his first 2 years. And I'm not saying Malik Renu is Trace Jackson Davis, but Trace wasn't perfect. Trace wasn't the Trace Jackson Davis of his junior and senior year. His sophomore year, he was fantastic. Don't get me wrong. And he carried the team, and he was our only saving grace on that team. Right? But he still would make a boneheaded player once or twice a game. Like, and then you go, fast forward 2 years later, and he is, in my opinion, was the best player in college basketball last year.
He's definitely the best player in college basketball at the end of last year.
At the end of last year, he was unstoppable. And other worldly performances he put on at the end of last year, and he's doing really well in the NBA now. And I think Renu, while plays a different role than Trace, has different tools.
Yes,
has a similar build, but just completely different styles.
Right.
Renu can do that. So the fact that some of the fan base wants to run him out after 2 years because he struggles with fouls or makes a boneheaded play once or twice a game, he's a sophomore, guys. Like it comes with the territory. Now, if he keeps doing that 75% the way through the season next year, all right, maybe we'll reassess. But that's the jump from being a sophomore to being an upperclassman, right? And being a junior is that growth, and that'd be 3 years under the same coach, right? So you'd think
continuity
when he has improved from the jump, by the way, he made from last year, which was he was an afterthought, to this year averaging double figures, to what hopefully he jumps to next year should be he's on pace to be all Big Ten second or first team guy as soon as next year. And some people want him out, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, I think and I understand, IU fans just being, being frustrated with how the end of the season went, really how the whole season.
You're allowed to be frustrated with it, but you can't.
But you also have to
be frustrated with it, and then be like, I want to win next year, but then be like, I don't want that to include Malik Renu because he's a tweener and he's awkward.
I don't care. You could handpick whoever you want from the portal. I don't care. Indiana basketball will be better next season with Malik Renu on it than off of it.
You know what teams thrived with tweeners? And some people are going to hate this comparison because the Villanova teams that won all of their titles with tweeners, guys.
Isn't Illinois similar to that this year? A little bit.
Illinois is very. They played Danger, right? But their best lineups have Coleman Hawkins.
Yeah, like Hawkins, Ty Rogers, Guerriere.
Yeah, they run tweeners.
Terrence Shannon. I don't know what NBA prospects Terrence Shannon has, in all honesty, but
I don't understand. Like, modern day college basketball, the best teams outside of Purdue run
Gotta have good
tweeners.
players. You gotta have good
They have
players.
good,
You
they
gotta have
have good
versatile
players
players.
and have versatile players. Renu is a versatile player, and he'll learn a lot this year from having to guard on the perimeter,
Yeah,
from
speaking
having
speaking
to
of
play the four,
yeah,
right? So
speaking of guard, you mentioned guard. I asked Greg Gard a few weeks ago in Madison what his take on Malik Renu is after Wisconsin beat IU up there. Of course, we beat them in the second game, but he was like,
yeah,
look, this dude's an absolute beast. I mean, he keeps
yeah,
improving, he keeps getting better. Renu scored 27, I think, or 30 or whatever against the Badgers up there, and they couldn't stop him. I mean, you see somebody who, as the season grew, by the way, and I didn't ignore them. Yeah, that's why you got to listen to our podcast. Watch the games, pay attention to these details. I mean, you were looking at a guy who was passing to the corner out of a Euro step on a fast break. You're talking about a guy who was showing elite Mackenzie Holmes level footwork down low when it comes to switching to pivot foot and really using that kind of skill level to put the defender in compromising situations. You absolutely need this guy to be on your team next year. But Indiana's going to have a lot of new faces on this roster next season. Matt and I are going to dive into the players we want in the transfer portal in just a second. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week. This past week in IU sports, and there are a lot of options here, from basketball to football to soccer. We are going to pay attention to the women's basketball team here. Around this time of year, we definitely want to closely take a look at how the IU women's basketball team is doing. There's a bit of a rough ending in the Big Ten tournament. Of course, the Hoosiers also lost to Illinois close to the end of the regular season. But based on some results we saw over the last week or so, we're going to find out on Selection Sunday, but I feel really good about IU's chances in hosting NCAA tournament games at Assembly Hall this season. We'll see what officially takes place here, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing Indiana as a 4 seed hosting games at Assembly Hall, the first and second round of the NCAA tournament. And I'm going to tell you something, folks. If you go to DraftKings, you go to FanDuel, Indiana is a bit of a dark horse as far as the women's basketball lines are concerned, as far as teams to make the Final Four, teams to make the national title game, teams to win it all. I don't think it's out of the question to say that this Indiana team could win it all this year. You're going to talk about Sydney Parrish and Mackenzie Holmes hopefully being healthy. I don't have the medical records, okay? So, if Mackenzie Holmes is wearing a heavy brace and, laboring up and down the floor, and if Sydney Parrish is a little banged up, and if the Hoosiers do have some injuries, that's going to be a challenge. But if they took this week and got healthier, I think IU's very dangerous, depending on the 1 seed in their region, to do some damage. I don't know who decided that the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 should be in Albany, New York, and in Portland, Oregon. But on the bright side, that means you're not going to play a team like UConn and UConn, right? Which is what Indiana had to do a couple of seasons ago when somehow UConn was able to get a Sweet 16 Elite 8 site in Connecticut. It wasn't on campus, but basically became a de facto home game for the Huskies when they knocked the Hoosiers out of the NCAA tournament. So looking forward to seeing the Hoosiers who fought through this season, a little bit of adversity. They beat Iowa at Assembly Hall. You see what the upside is for this program. I'm looking forward to seeing them do some serious damage as far as March Madness is concerned. Folks, this part is important. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. If you'd like to find us on social media, you can head over to Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube to find us at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound. Matt, we've got a whole ton of thoughts as it relates to the transfer portal. We've got guys that Indiana should target. Look, the Hoosier Sound folks, I don't know if you knew this. The Hoosier Sound can tamper. So, even if guys aren't in the portal yet, we're going to recommend players for Indiana to go out and get. Of course, we're expecting some of these guys to put their names in over the next handful of days and weeks. Matt, I'm going to kick it over to you. Indiana's going to have to add probably 3, 4, 5 pieces to this team in this upcoming offseason. Who are some of the guys that you want the Hoosiers to target once the portal opens on Monday?
All right, so the way I'll preface this, Nithin went and looked at a bunch. I think he went mostly mid-major guys, right?
It was like it was a wide range. There were a lot of mid-major guys out there, though. Yeah.
Yeah. So went and picked out a bunch of players. I went and found players that are on struggling Power Five teams that I
Ooh,
think their coaches are going to get canned that should be available in the portal. So I went through and found all the guys that I really liked off the bottom feeder teams,
nice.
that I think could be winners if they're put in the right situation. Kind of like how AJ Store was last year,
St. John's, Wisconsin.
St. John's, and I want to see them improve. So my list basically starts and ends with two names, but the first name I'll throw out there is by far and away my favorite college basketball player on a sucky team, and that's Jordan Pope.
Ooh, nice.
Now, Jordan Pope is a sophomore guard from Oregon State. Oregon State's coach looks like he's going to get the can. They came in last place in the Pac-12 this year. He averages 17.5 points per game, shoots 45% from the field, 37% from three, and music all Hoosier fans, shot 107 free throws at an 87% clip this year. So he's a guy that can not only score from outside, he hit 178 threes, or he took 178 threes and hit 66 of them this year, but he also gets the free throw line and hits them at an 87% clip. He's a score first point guard. He only averages about three assists per game. He's at 6'2", so he has decent size. He's not, huge, but he's also not small, and he can create his own shot. And I think he's a guy that could come in, and if you partnered him with a guy like Malik Renu and Mbako and Galloway, is a guy that could really pop off. And you don't have to go to him every single possession, but the fact that he's even out there is a threat, and he can drop 25 to 30 on any given night, while also giving you a pretty steady like 10 to 15. And I think that's what that Indiana really needs, is a guy that from the guard position can give you points at a steady clip.
I like that one a lot. We're talking about somebody who's only played 2 seasons thus far.
Hey, he's a sophomore. Yeah.
Power conference experience, right? Pac-12 through and through. And I think Oregon State may have committed to Wayne Tinkle going into next season, but this is almost like a Premier League team getting relegated to the championship, right? I mean, Jordan Pope, Oregon State's in the Mountain West effectively.
They're in the Mountain West now.
Starting next season. He's gonna have no desire. I mean, I'd be shocked if he had any interest in staying there. He's a California guy, so hopefully Indiana can pry him away from, the UCLAs and the USCs, because it's funny, UCLA, if you watch them this year, and if you didn't, I understand. They're going to be looking for a lot of similar players to this Indiana team. So
funny enough, UCLA might be looking for a coach too, from what I've been hearing. So I think Indiana should have, especially with all these California teams joining the Big Ten, you can now go to the West Coast and compete with these teams. You're going to be playing, possibly 8 games on the West Coast. I mean, it's probably going to be less than that, but 4 games on the West Coast. You could be playing 8 games against West Coast teams, 4 games on the road, possibly, come conference play.
On the 87% free throws. Wow. I almost didn't comprehend that. It almost I was like, that's more than that's possible.
And
right?
he shot 107 free throws this year. So he gets to the line quite a bit. So
I like hearing that. Who else do you have on your list, Matt?
All right, second one. And I think this one's super fun. I really like this one. Another really struggling team. I believe they also they tied for last in their conference in the Big 12, and this is Oklahoma State. Mine's Javon Small. Now, Javon Small started his career at Eastern Carolina, transferred this year to Oklahoma State. He averaged again, another score first point guard, averaged about 15 points per game. Now he's a little bit better at distributing the ball. And he's a little bit less efficient than Jordan Pope, because he's sitting just under 45% from the field. But again, another guy that gets to the line, shoots the free throws very well. 37% three-point shooter, has been improving steadily every single year he's played. And was really the sole bright spot on that Oklahoma State team this year.
I like that one a lot.
And he's an Indiana kid.
Indiana guy. He had some big games against good teams in that league, and exactly the kind of thing, exactly the thing that you want to see as far as that one's concerned. As far as Javon Small, I mean, to see Oklahoma State and Oregon State have tough years, but then you have guys like Jordan Pope and Small who really
Yep.
stuck with it
Yep.
all season, right? I mean,
Yep.
Small had a really good game in their conference tournament loss to UCF, 21 points in that one. Regular season finale against BYU, he had 34 in that one. He didn't just quit because his team was losing. And I also
Nope.
like the fact that from the guard position, he was able to come in. They lost you there for just a tick, but he was able to come in and get 5 rebounds a game as well, or close to that number.
And he's small. He's not huge. He's 6'3", and he averages half of his shots from three. He shot about 338 shots this year. 163 of them were from three, and shot at a 37% clip. So he's not a guy that's going to come out there and really hog the ball, but he's going to hit 2 to 3 of them a game, right? And that's what you kind of need for an Indiana team.
And when you think about this roster, like if you do go out and you do land a player like that, you know what you say? You say, okay, if I land Javon Small, hey, let me go out there and get somebody who is a catch and shoot guy on the perimeter. Let me go out and add somebody who can, pop off a 3-pointer comfortably, like whatever role Parker Stewart sort of played at Indiana, right? Miller Kopp played at Indiana, because you can't just go out and recruit positions. You can't just go out and recruit stars. These pieces have to mix and match and work with each other. So if you go out and get Malik Renu to come back, well, guess what? Try to find a player or two that works with his skill set. And so, same thing with the first portal player you land, whoever it is. You go out and get, okay, then the next guy has to fit with those two guys and fit with Trey Galloway and fit with Gabe Cupps and fit with Anthony Leal. Well, it just looks like Terrence Shannon got banged up, so that's not great for the Illini.
Yeah, no.
Wrist. My list was really wide spanning. I looked at players that maybe had some connection to Indiana before.
Yep.
Looked at players that maybe had a connection to the state of Indiana, much like your guy Javon Small did.
Yeah.
Looked at players who maybe wore the Indiana jersey before, which might rub some folks the wrong way. And then, a couple of others that I think could just serve as really good fits as far as the Hoosiers are concerned. I'm going to start with Jalen Blackman, right? That's somebody a lot of IU fans have targeted. The Stetson guy, James Blackman Jr.'s brother, somebody who scored 40 in their conference tournament game recently.
Yes,
just
in
straight
the championship game.
Straight up bucket getter, right? Stetson's going to the NCAA tournament, if I'm not mistaken. That's going to be a name that you hear in March Madness. Somebody who, I mean, 43 on 12 of 22 shooting. This is one that you don't have to overthink. And I don't care what weaknesses Jalen Blackman has in his game. I don't care about any of this, right? Like, you're talking about someone who's an Indiana guy. He needed to visit a couple of other schools, take a couple trips, go out to Arizona and play for Grand Canyon, go to Florida, play for Stetson. Now, I think it's high time that he wore the cream and crimson going into next season. I don't think there's much more to argue about that.
I liked Jalen Blackman a lot. But I mean, we have to talk about it. His defense has been
shaky. It's rough.
Shaky. Yeah, it's rough. It's really rough.
Yeah,
but
it's a
that's why I said if you can convince him to come to IU and maybe be that sixth guy off the bench that comes and gives you 10 points per game off the bench and just cooks every game straight off the bench, comes in against and just plays against the other team's backups, like, that would be elite. And I don't know if they could do that. I don't know if that's feasible. I don't know.
It's really fascinating, right? Because Indiana's going after, and this has already been reported, they're going after Clark Slikert out of UPenn and Marcus Foster, right? Out of Furman? Furman, yeah. And
I really like Foster.
It's fascinating because
I really like Foster.
I think both of those guys are kind of in a similar vein, right? They're bucket getters. They can also move the basketball. And I think they have pretty major weaknesses on defense. But what's interesting to me,
I think Foster's much better, but yeah.
okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair,
Yeah.
totally fair to say. What's interesting to me though is that's exactly the kind of player I want Mike Woodson to pursue. Somebody who is a bucket getter, who's got moves in his bag. He can cross you up, hit you for three, can drive past you to the rim. And you know what? If you close out on him on the arc, and if you have the rim protector down low, he can kick it out to the wing, kick it out to the corner, and distribute to a teammate for an open shot.
Right.
Mike Woodson can teach defense, if you ask me.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think he's gotten growth on the defensive side from Jalen Hood-Schifino, from Trace Jackson Davis, from Khalil Ware, from Trey Galloway, from Malik Renu. I think these are all players that have taken steps forward. Mackenzie Mbako's defensive improvement deserves some type of award for what you saw from November through March and April, through February and March.
Yeah.
Don't listen to me. Listen to the coaches that speak on TV. Look at Ant Wright's breakdowns. Look at Tony Andrania's comments when he tweets out on social media. Like, forget my opinion. People who are objective about this basketball team clearly point out Mackenzie Mbako's growth on the defensive side of the ball has made a major difference. Yep. That's exactly the kind of player I think Indiana could thrive by targeting. So Jalen Blackman to me is like a
91% free throw shooter. 91%. Now this dude's a bucket. I
only thought you could make like 60% from the line.
I did only think it was.
Are you serious? You can make 80. What was it?
Let's see. I would love the experiment if he comes to Indiana as 91% free throw shooter and starts shooting in the 70s. I will think this place is cursed. Yeah. But no, I would be happy with Jalen Blackman don't get me wrong. I want, if he comes in, I want another guard with him. I want another power 5 guard.
I'm just hoping, look, I'm curious what the matchup is going to be, but I've got my eyes on Stetson as a round of 64 winner coming up once Sunday night comes around.
Absolutely.
Lots of different ways to go with this. So I'm going to just list everyone that I had here, and then I'll pick and choose a couple of guys to dive into a little bit more. So
okay, I'll do the same after you do that.
My wide net of transfers, again, there's no order to this. It's just there's no order, not alphabetical, not priority, not position. It's just these guys popped into my mind. Xavier Booker, right? Indiana guy, Michigan State. We can
love that. Yes.
Dylan Mitchell, right? I'm not sure what he's thinking about, but Montverde guy, you can maybe recreate some goodwill as far as Montverde is concerned. Is Mitchell going to stay in Texas after a couple years? He's definitely got NBA potential. Is he just going to go there? Bruce Thornton. Now, this one has changed.
He's on my list a little bit.
Because Bruce Thornton and the Ohio State Buckeyes, Jake freaking Diebler, decided that he was going to coach.
Yep.
How unfortunate. I was ready to raid the Buckeyes for Bruce Thornton, for Felix Okpara, for
Roddy Gale.
And you kind of wonder now if maybe they're looking at heading down to Wisconsin road, bring back a lot of key players, add 1 or 2 transfers, and make a strong tournament bid for next season with Jake Diebler as their coach. If they go a different direction,
I'm going to be so mad. Diebler deserves that job after what he did.
We'll see. I mentioned a couple of guys that wore IU colors before. So please do not stop listening to this podcast.
Riot. I want you guys to literally at Nithin right now for these.
Don't
please do.
Like, listen to the end. We have about like 10 minutes after this, okay? So like just stay patient, okay? Stay with me, folks.
All right.
Tamar Bates and Christian Lander.
Oh.
Just stay with me. Right, especially
okay. Convince me.
Tamar Bates, right now, is Tamar Bates a starter level guard in a Power 5 conference?
Yes.
Guys, Mizzou sucked. They stunk this year. I think they went 0-19, 0-18 regular season, 0-1 conference play. But that wasn't Tamar Bates.
So bad.
I mean, Dennis.
No. That
Coach,
was not Tamar Bates.
Yeah.
Didn't have meatball.
Nick Honor was a bit of a problem this year. That dude. he took so many shots that he shouldn't have taken. Because Mizzou was on my TV way more than they should have been because of Tamar Bates. 28,
Tamar
20,
was balling.
27 minutes, 50% from the field, 39% from three on 3 attempts per game, 13.5 points, 3 rebounds, a steal again, 1.7 turnovers. Again, 1.7 turnovers in 27 minutes. You don't have to recreate the wheel here.
You don't have to recreate the wheel. There's no way he's coming back because he left because he didn't think he was going to get a big enough role here, and he would have gotten a gigantic role here, and probably doesn't see eye to eye with the staff. But still,
I'm not necessarily dying on this hill.
He could have done that. Those numbers here.
Was Tamar Bates a starter level guard in a Power 5 conference at this point last year? No way.
No.
So hey, you know what?
Hey, that's
another school went
sophomore to junior year. Right? That's what growth from sophomore to junior year is,
hey,
right?
Another school went out, made him a better player, poach him back.
Okay.
Christian Lander. I'm not going to die on this hill either. But all I'm saying is he showed some growth last season. Western Kentucky put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in improving him as a basketball player.
Yep.
I would not be surprised if he was a frequent minute getter on a Power 5 team next season. Something to think about, of course, Evansville, Indiana guy. Xavier Lee, Princeton. Wade Taylor, Texas A&M. That's, of course, if Buzz Williams gets fired. You know, we're thinking about, hey, who might get cut, who might get canned as far as coaches are concerned. We'll see what happens there. KJ Evans from Oregon. Obviously, Woodson had a key interest in recruiting KJ Evans at Oregon. Khalil Ware came over from Oregon. KJ Evans, an Oregon Big Ten guy now. You know, you go out and say, hey, Dana Altman, screw you. We're going to do it another time. Let's get KJ Evans. Again, reinvent that, sort of revamp that Montverde connection. Try to get some positive vibes going again after McNeely's decommitment. It's a guy that could play the wing if for some reason Mako goes on to the greener grass somewhere else. Curious to see that one. Tucker DeVries from Drake. Absolute baller. One of my favorite players in college basketball. St. Thomas. An actual guy. This is an actual guy, folks. Big
I want him just for the name.
Conference.
Yeah, Big Sky.
This dude is an absolute machine. And I don't know. I don't know what they're feeding their players.
St. Thomas?
I don't know what they're feeding their players at Northern Colorado, Matt.
Oh, I know.
But but Dalton Connect does his thing last year. And St. Thomas steps in as a point forward on this basketball team and is an unstoppable juggernaut. I don't know what his transfer prospects are going to look like. He started his career at Loyola. I don't think that season is going to count from an eligibility standpoint. Transferred to Northern Colorado this past season. I think he's going to have 2 years left. He might have 1 year left. We'll get the official word on that, shortly. But this guy, 35 minutes, 19.7 points per game, 9.8 rebounds per game, 4.2 assists per game, 1.7 steals, 1 block, 87% free throws on 4 attempts per game, 33% from 3, 6 attempts per game, 6'7",
and they're pretty good in the league.
200-pound tweener forward. This is the kind of guy that some type of power conference team is going to get. He's going to completely change their fortunes. You go out and you see what someone like Walter Clayton did for Florida this year, completely revamping their identity, their culture. Yeah. Clayton came over from Iona, went out to Florida, and really, really hit it. As far as the Florida Gators are concerned, they beat Alabama yesterday in the SEC tournament. They're going to be going for that SEC championship game. Title game? No, I think they're in the semis today. But anyway, we're talking about a Gators team that really thrived out of this standpoint.
I can't get over this guy's name.
I can't get over his game.
His game is good too. Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about somebody that's able to attack downhill, cause a lot of problems. And if you were like, well, hey, did it in the Big Sky, you dimwit. First of all,
Dalton Connect did it in the Big Sky.
Yeah. So you can take that and shove it.
With also very similar stats.
I don't know what they're doing. But this dude, I watched a few games of his after I stumbled across his numbers. And the eye test, like the fundamentals, the basics, the stuff between the lines, he's actually doing those things in addition to just producing.
Yep.
It's absolutely nuts. And he goes out there against good teams. Talk about a team like Colorado State, 11-15. You talk about New Mexico. You talk about Colorado, right? The Buffaloes out of the Pac-12, 27 points, 9 rebounds in a matter of playing 37 minutes, 10 of 22 shooting, made a couple of threes.
Can you imagine running this guy out with Mbako and Renu?
Doesn't it kind of fit? I mean, Mbako,
It's kind of
okay.
sexy.
I'm like, you think about a lineup with Galloway, Javon Small.
This guy, the St. Thomas screams to me 3. So
St. Thomas, Mbako, and Renu.
Yeah. So St. Thomas the 3, Mbako at the 4, Renu at the 5. And then switchability.
Jordan Pope or
Yeah.
Javon Small, or you bring Jalen Blackman off the bench.
Yeah.
Again, we're talking about how 1 or 2 guys can change the landscape.
Change the team. Yes.
As far as Indiana is concerned. That's a name that you probably haven't heard of. This dude's absolute screamer as it relates to college basketball. Zeke Mayo, South Dakota State. The problem with Zeke Mayo is he's a Lawrence, Kansas guy.
Yeah.
That's the problem. But Bill Self is a gangster.
Well, I mean, St. Thomas is an Omaha, Nebraska guy.
Creighton gets him, I'm going to riot. If Nebraska gets him, I'm going to riot twice.
Twice.
Malik Mack, Harvard. We saw him in the non-conference.
Yes.
Scorer, right? Again,
yes.
Massive defensive
freshman
weaknesses. Massive defensive weaknesses. Let Woodson help out there.
And he's a freshman.
Bring Tommy Amaker to the assistant staff if you want.
Or is he a freshman or is he a sophomore?
He is a freshman. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Andrei Stojakovic, Stanford coach Jared Haas just got fired. Indiana went after Stojakovic as far as the high school recruiting process is concerned. This is somebody who you're talking about. Look, go out there, stand on the perimeter, nail down, catch and shoot.
Shooter.
Just finished his freshman season, 3 years of eligibility. Again, we're tampering here. None of these guys actually gotten into the portal.
We can tamper.
Similar story with Miro Little at Baylor. Not sure if he sees a path to playing time at Baylor. Dane Fife is responsible for his recruitment. Maybe you try to smooth over those cracks and try to make something happen there.
Yeah,
we didn't forget about Indiana State, folks. Ryan Conwell and Isaiah Swope, both very interesting. I actually like Ryan Conwell a little bit more. Of course,
why is that?
He has transferred from South Florida to Indiana State before, so we'll see if there are any issues as far as a second transfer. I don't foresee that being a problem at all. But I'm talking about Indiana guy. Of course, Swope also is an Indiana guy, but Conwell's a little bit bigger. I like the 6'4" guy compared to the 5'10" guy. It's just Swope doesn't have as much of that Big Ten grinding experience. Conwell's gone through it with South Florida, a little bit of a higher level conference than the Missouri Valley out in the American. I like the 6'4" piece. He's able to, fit a lot of concerns for Indiana. He's a good rebounder, good 3-point shooter, good free throw shooter. I like Conwell a little bit more. If you're telling me Indiana gets Isaiah Swope, I'm still throwing a party.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think that covers off. I talked about Xavier Lee, Princeton guard, Doug McDaniel from Michigan. Joanne Howard got fired. We'll see if that one's interesting. And I know, okay, folks, Bloomington residents, Connor Hickman, shooter, knockdown guy, someone who can stand out there. And look, you don't need to tell me twice about how valuable it is to have a Bloomington guy who's cared about Indiana, wear the Indiana jersey. He's played 3 seasons at Bradley. He's averaged 38% from 3 in his career. Bradley's a very good basketball team. MVC all freshman, all MVC guy. Missouri Valley's a very good conference. Last year, 14.5 points. This past season, 14.5 points per game at Bradley. Absolute sniper. Again, catch and shoot, drop down, bomb away, 6'3" shooting guard. Let's go. Let's have some fun. Perfect fit to me. If you're talking about somebody alongside Trey Galloway, do the right things, stand out there, knock down some threes, make everyone really happy. I don't think I'm
very happy.
Wide list. Who else you got, Matt?
All right, I got an even wider list.
Oh, perfect.
All right, so we got more. I got another Indiana guy, Jaden Taylor, plays tonight for NC State. They've been talking about NC State's coach being on the hot seat a little bit.
Yeah.
And he's a guy, again, 41% from the floor, He's more of a 6'4", doesn't need the ball in his hands, shoots 36% from three. Obviously from Indianapolis, played at Butler for 2 years, transferred, done very well for the Wolfpack this year. Tremont Mark from Arkansas, who is a junior and an absolute superstar, and he played very well at Houston. He has 1 year of eligibility left. And who knows where Arkansas is kind of going. And he's the guy that, Indiana probably should have targeted last year. Will definitely be targeting this year. Had a step up in production, went from 10 points per game in 2022 to 16 points per game this past year. Also shoots about 36% from three and 80% from the free throw line.
Did he start at Houston?
He started at Houston.
He began
yes.
at Houston. Okay.
He began 3 years at Houston, 1 year at Arkansas. Has an extra year left. Would be a COVID senior. Simas Lukosius. Yes. Simas, again, absolute sniper from the outside, big guy. Another guy from Butler. Started his career at Butler, went 1 year to Cincinnati, is doing fantastic on a very good Cincinnati team, averaged about 10 points per game, 6'8" guard.
We need Thad Matta to throw in a good word.
6'8" guard. Well, he might want it back. Doug McDaniel is an interesting one.
Yep. Got that one. We talked about him.
Yep. Bruce Thornton. We already talked about him. Here's an interesting one. Out of left field. Stanford is probably moving on from their head coach.
They fired him. He got fired 8 minutes after they lost in the Pac-12 tournament.
All right, perfect. All right, so he's already fired. Maxime Renu.
Yeah, Renaud.
Yeah. He is a 7'1" junior from Paris. Averaged about 15.5 points per game this year. Shoots 36% from three as a 7-footer and 78% for the free throw line. Thank you very much. Also, he's got some work to do on the defense, but that could be something Woodson works on with him. Again, I went along the line of looking at the absolute loserest of the losers this year and
interesting perspective. I like that. I like that idea.
And picking guys off the team that I think can be good. This guy started his college basketball career at Tennessee, had a big jump up in production this year at Louisville, and that's Brandon Huntley Hatfield.
Oh, yeah.
Forward, another tweener guy, more of a 4, lanky, 6'10" guy from Clarksville, Tennessee. Shot 42% from threes here. Of course, it's only on 21 takes. So as a caveat,
whatever,
something to work on.
1 per game.
And he shoots 67% from the free throw line. But again, averaged about 13 points per game in a Power 5 conference as a junior. Still has, I think, a year or 2 left to play. Sky Clark from Louisville, another guy from Louisville. Guard, I wouldn't be surprised if his name gets brought up for Indiana. Started his career at Illinois. Played in, very famously about 13 games for them and then quit halfway through the year. Stuck it out all year this year with Louisville, averaged 13 points per game for them for this year. Also shot about 35% from three.
That Indiana-Illinois game in Champaign, if they do have one next, if that happens, oh man,
spicy.
That's Eric Gordon 2.0 if that takes place.
All right, I need to preface this with I said on a podcast earlier this year that I don't want any more guards from Pittsburgh. Semicolon, however, comma. That being said, Carlton Carrington from Pittsburgh, freshman 6'5" point guard.
Yeah.
From Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah. He's a good
averaged 13.8 points per game as a freshman in a Power 5 conference, 4 assists, 5 rebounds per game. Excellent rebounder from the guard position. As a freshman. Yes, and he's actually pretty decent defensively because he's a 6'5" guy that can move. Shot 32% from three as a freshman. That can be improved. 78% from the line shows me that he can shoot a little bit better than that. We shall see. I have Roddy Gale. Talked about him. Another guy on Pittsburgh that I would love to see on the Hoosiers, and that is Blake Hinson.
Oh, okay.
Blake Hinson is weird. He is weird because he played 2 years at Ole Miss, took 2 years off, came back and played 2 years at Pitt. Has averaged 15 points and 18 points per game. I am not quite sure if he still has his COVID year. So that we need to figure that out because I'm not quite certain he does, even though he did play in 1920, so he should.
Yeah, I'll give
But
that a look. Yeah.
I need to see, but he shot 42% from three this year on 261 attempts. He's 6'8", average 18 points per game in a Power 5 conference. Now Pittsburgh was kind of, up or down this year. But they kind of finished towards the top of what was a very mid ACC.
Mm-hmm.
But it still looks like they're not happy with what Capel has really given them. So they might honestly look to move on from him at some point this summer. And if they do, I would love for them to go after Blake Hinson.
I'd
Again,
love for us to also go after Jeff Capel.
yeah. As an assistant coach.
As an assistant, yeah.
All right. This is something else. I also looked for a couple teams that I thought were Power 5 coaches that could look to move on. This guy's from Iowa State, who I think TJ Otzelberger is probably going to be looking to move on to a bigger job this year because he's going to get some offers. Tamin Lipsey.
Yep.
Tamin Lipsey is a 6'1" guard.
I think it's Tamin, but
is it Tamin?
Yeah,
Tamin Lipsey from Iowa State shoots 38% from three and 100 attempts, 12.5 points per game. Is a smaller guard from Iowa in the Big Ten footprint, and just an absolute lights out shooter. He's actually
he goes to Michigan.
Better at 30. I'm gonna be pissed. Yeah. Another guy who the team might look to move on from their coach. So and this is a guy that also made his name in the NCAA tournament 2 years ago, maybe even last year. Arthur Kaluma, from Kansas State. He's a junior, 6'7", averaged about 14 points per game, 34% from three this year on 145 takes. He's a guy that could come in and be an absolutely athletic wing, and I think he'd be the perfect guy. All the wings that I'm looking at are guys that I think would fit really well next to Mbako and Renu, and I think Kaluma would look fantastic next to those two. Good rebounder too, by the way. He's averaged 7 rebounds per game at 6'7". So that's a guy I'm looking at. Another guy from Kansas State, Cam Carter. 6'3" junior from Louisiana, started his career at Mississippi State, has improved every single year, including a big jump this year going to his junior year. Shoots about he's a 31% three-point shooter, but he was asked to take a lot more threes this year than I think he was probably comfortable with at Kansas State. Big time driver of the ball, super athletic at 6'3". Eric Dixon, senior from Villanova. They're probably looking on to move on from their head coach because they've been pretty mid. Philly guy, or at least from Willow Grove, but still average about 16 points per game this year. He's a senior, has an extra year left. Could be an excellent addition next to Malik Renu and Mbako. And then my last two are TJ Bamba from Villanova, 6'5" senior, has an extra year left, average about 10 points per game this year. He's a wonderful defender. And Tyrese Hunter from Texas.
Yep. Former Iowa State guy.
From Wisconsin.
Indiana needs to get older.
Yep.
And I think that's the biggest thing. And Mike Woodson can fix that, right? Like, especially with McNeely decommitting, you can go out and add some older players. Of course, there are some dynamic youngsters out there too that have 2-3+ years left. So bottom line is,
I'll tell you this. Plenty of options. The guys that I want the most out of the people I just kind of listed off would be probably Tremont Mark, Blake Hinson, and Carlton Carrington.
Carrington is a really good call. That guy.
Carrington is a baller.
Fix a lot of Indiana's issues. From offensive rebounding, defensive rebounding, ball movement, defense. Mark, I don't think too much more needs to be said about Tremont Mark. I think Sky Clark has a little too much going on.
That's a lot of baggage. That's a lot of baggage. Also, that's he's somebody that Louisville's going to want to keep. And depending on who they hire as a coach, right, they could probably throw a nice NIL bag to make him stay. So I'd be surprised if he goes. But yeah, again, depending on what Pittsburgh does with Capel, the Pittsburgh to Indiana really pipeline would be fantastic.
That'd be really fascinating.
Again, Blake Hinson's one of the best players in college basketball and ACC. But in college basketball in general. And that's a guy that, could be looking to move on. And then Carrington obviously going to a true sophomore year. right?
Yeah, and
So
I could see this staff really going after Maxime Reynaud after out of Stanford. Of course, they
yep,
fired their coach. More of a raw prospect, and that could be someone that Indiana says, "Hey, look, let's get him in. Let's develop. Let's see what more we can get out of him, especially someone that
yep.
can make a handful of free throws and help your cause there." From my list, Jalen Blackman is my number one. It's just because I think if you make the call, he's a commitment within 48 hours. Like I don't
Yeah.
really think Jalen Blackman is, I don't think there are any burned bridges between Indiana and the Blackman family. So, unless I'm totally missing something, VJ Blackman came and played for Indiana as well. I think as a walk-on. I don't think he got a scholarship, but
Yeah.
he was still on the squad. And St. Thomas is the other guy that I'm really, really interested in and want the Hoosiers to make a play for. Connor Hickman, I think that's another one. Commitment within 48 hours if you make the phone call. Knockdown shooter, 38% from a very good Missouri Valley Conference. You saw how great transfers from the Missouri Valley were as far as college basketball were concerned last season. They're doing something right in that conference. I want a piece of that. Quick social media shout out, folks. A reminder, if you'd like to find us, follow us, subscribe, like what we have to share with all of you. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube at Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound. On Instagram, Matt, we're at Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
You can find us there. Go look at our stuff. We share a lot of updates here, a lot of the latest and greatest info. If we see someone that Indiana is pursuing in the portal, we'll make sure we drop a note as far as that's concerned. That's what took place this past week with Clark Slikert as well as Marcus Foster. Very curious to see how far Indiana goes with both of those. I do like the Hoosiers making those phone calls to those two players. Definitely fit the type of guy I want to see on this roster next year. You can find us on social media. Join us if you have already. Tell a neighbor, tell a neighbor, share with a friend. That type of growth really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. Matt, anything else to wind down here? March Madness Selection Sunday tomorrow, men's and women's. Tournament starts Tuesday with the playing games. Wednesday that continues. Thursday the big stuff starts. Anything on your mind as we wind down here on the Saturday evening?
Enjoy March. Also enjoy portal season because I know I have heard from some of my sources that I get, and I'm not pretending to be an insider. I just hear some things through the grapevine.
Scuttlebutt.
Yeah, there are a couple names going to be in the transfer portal that are Big Ten guys that might surprise some people. And I'll just say I'll give you guys a little bit of a hint. They're from East Coast teams. So, yeah, it's the transfer portal season is going to be wild. It'll be interesting to see who Indiana can retain, and who decides to leave, and yeah, and who they can go after and get. I Jalen Blackman edition would be awesome. I think bringing the Blackman family back and having everybody play for Indiana would be sick.
Buckets.
Especially after kind of, I want to say like James Blackman Jr. honestly was treated pretty poorly as an Indiana player. And when looking back on it, he was actually a fantastic player on the team. So it would be kind of fun to have full circle and have everybody celebrating having a Blackman back on the team. So Blackman, not Black Man. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that.
You're good. You're good. Perfect.
I know Chap is going to be the comment. It's like, hey,
yeah, for sure.
Hey,
shout out Chap. Yeah, exactly. As far as I'm concerned, yeah, totally echo what Matt's saying. Can't wait to see the women's team take the court at Assembly Hall starting, maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We'll see when that takes place. The net ranking needs to be abolished. Fired into the sun.
Yeah,
it's messed up right now. Look, there might be a metric system that works that you want to use, but right now there are just way too many inefficiencies with that formula that do not correctly rank teams and stack teams based on how they are. And I'm not saying Indiana should have gotten at-large consideration. I don't think they should have. But like under no universe should Maryland and Minnesota and Ohio State all have higher net rankings than Indiana is concerned. And all I'm saying is it's just messed up right now. I'm an analytics guy. I like that part of the game as it relates to basketball or football. I think there are a lot of metric systems that work. Right now, Net and Ken Pom put way too much weight on how you do against quad 4 opponents and that margin of victory stuff The point of the game should be to win the game. So until they fix
Mhm.
that, I think they have to look at other aspects of things. I'm fine with how they look at quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4. I'm fine with strength of schedule. I think at the end of the day, it should just come down to who did you beat, and how difficult, how many games did you win, and who did you beat, right? Like, I think that's
Yeah.
what it should come down to at the end of the day. Indiana didn't do enough of that this year. Indiana had no great non-conference wins. Indiana didn't win enough games to be considered, but for the net ranking to have teams like Maryland and Minnesota and Ohio State 15, 20, 30 spots higher than the Hoosiers, I think that was an absolute joke. But folks, that about wraps it up for episode 324 of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation. We will see you next time.
Peace and love, go Hoosiers.